Hello.
Hi, John.
Go ahead and tell. Hello. Go ahead and tell me your name, uh, where you're from, some general details about yourself, and your deal over at Cal Poly.
Well, I don't really want to dox myself, but my name's Tony. Uh, I went to Cal Poly Pomona for 5 years, uh, like two and a half of them as a computer engineer, and then two and a half of them as a historian.
Okay. Uh, are there any general things the audience should know about you before we start this?
No, I think I'm pretty normal. Like, I don't think my experience is slightly different from what other people had, but I don't think it's extraordinary in any way.
Okay. Uh, in that case, then let's go ahead and begin. Uh, I will tell the audience that you have heard the original video that I posted, and you are, in fact, the friend that I was talking about in that video that was letting me speak your part of the story, and you wish to add on to it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In that case, then this will serve as a part two. Uh, I have yet to really hear from any buddy that's been having any questions about the first part of the video, but granted, small channel plus not too many people have listened to it. So any of those listening, there have yet to be any addendums to the first video. In that case, Tony will be going over a lot of things that either I didn't cover or he'll be going over the specifics that I didn't. So uh,
Mhm.
he's already sent me his notes. I've looked them over. Nothing too crazy. So I will go ahead and turn it over to him and go ahead and speak your life out, man.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to start off by saying that I think Cal Poly is a good school. I preface it because a lot of the things I'm talking about like bear explanation. So when I talk about like why the parking situation is bad, I want you to know that the reason I'm talking so much about it is because it's like those reasons aren't obvious. Um, but Cal Poly, I think, is a decent school. It has a somewhat unique way of teaching people where it's more hands on. It has the learn by doing ethos that makes up what a Cal Poly institution is. Um, and like the classes are relatively small. Would you agree on that, John?
Yes, other than the general education classes.
Yeah, but not even all of those. It depends. Like I know I've had like 100 student course one time, but that's like rare. I feel.
Yes, I've only ever had that in uh, either chemistry class and then maybe physics. But other than that, I never really saw that again.
Yeah. Um, so that was something I learned is not normal. Like there are some courses or at some universities where the ratio of teachers to students is super low. But at Cal Poly, it's a pretty reasonable uh, ratio. Um, Something I miss about Cal Poly is like how kind of diverse it is, and that there's like a lot of different kinds of people. Like not even just like different ethnicities, but there are like different kinds of people like that are all interacting, like people with different personalities, people from different um, educational backgrounds, and it was a like really enjoyable place. It was like a tableau. Is that the right word?
I believe so. It was a relatively diverse forum of ideas, I would probably say.
Yeah. So, I mean, that did mean we had some interesting individuals at school, but it also meant we had genuinely interesting people at our school too. So, I only mention that because our new school is like the students are kind of templates. There's like a style that's going on, and people are trying to emulate the style.
Okay.
Anyway, I also like the campus. Um, it has a good mix between the kind of like green spaces and the urban. I think on Wikipedia I called it like suburban, and so some schools you'll go to, like Stanford or Davis, there's a ton of green, but like everything's so far away from each other. And there's some places like San Diego State or UCLA where it's just like almost skyscrapers, um, with everything like packed so densely, and there's like concrete everywhere. Uh, so if that's important to you, like there's wildlife on Cal Poly Pomona,
Yeah, so
and
general setting was a bit more natural, a bit more open, and the students weren't trying to fit a certain template, like you said. So for those who are looking to go to the campus, it's not as rigid, I should say.
yeah. And I'll say one thing, which some people will think is a bad thing, but which I found was a good thing, is that there's not really a Greek life there. Like the Greek life exists, but it's not a party school, so it's much more like subdued. The fraternities get into like their fraternity stuff, but there's much more focus on the philanthropy aspect at our school than I've seen at other schools. Um, but it like Cal Poly Pomona and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo have been really like cracked down on student drinking and partying ever since. Like it was a few years before we started our freshman year, someone died at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo from alcohol overdose. So
Yeah,
if
and we've had a
so,
few incidents on campus even while we were there as well. So they've
yeah,
definitely cracked down on it.
yeah. So that for me, I liked that because it meant you didn't have to like deal with like a kind of party school, but it also there's no like fraternity row. So like I think some frats have houses, but they're like not near the school. Um, and maybe that is part of the reason why Cal Poly Pomona doesn't have like a school life. Um, like after like 5 o'clock, and then on weekends, there's like no one at the school, and that's I think partly, or it's there's a few major part components of it because it's a commuter school. People will tell you it's not. It absolutely is a commuter school. Most people commute onto campus. They have to build more freshman housing because freshmen were having to commute. Uh, it They don't offer services after certain times during the day, and they don't offer them at all during the weekends. So, you kind of don't have a reason to go to school on the weekends or leave your room if you live on campus. So, if you're living on campus, be prepared for that.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and get started and start diving into your notes. And just to let everybody know, these are more particulars that we're generally going behind the scenes. And as Tony will explain, he was part of multiple clubs and several events and organizers. So he's seen a bit of the background as well as things going on. So whereas the shut-in me that was an engineer didn't have time for nothing, uh, did not have that opportunity. So he's gonna go over, and I'll try to jump in whenever I come up with a question that maybe the audience would have in hearing what you
Okay.
have to say. But uh, go on ahead, and just to let people know, these are his how he had seen it. So just be forewarned, this isn't a definitive. So okay, I'll hand
Yeah.
over the mic to you.
This is how okay. Thank you. This is how I remember it. This is how I saw it. Like my memory is not perfect, so I might get some things wrong. Um, and I want to say like some of these problems are going to be problems at other schools. So the first thing I want to talk about is the engineering situation, which I thought was really bad at Cal Poly Pomona, and then realized was even worse other places. So engineering, and I think the other STEM fields are chronically impacted. You like they don't have enough staff teaching these courses, and they keep adding more students, and like I'm not kidding when I say like sometimes they'll offer two sections of a course that everyone has to take and that you have to take other courses. So like that are prerequisites basically. So these classes will fill up super quickly, and basically if you have a registration time that isn't particularly good, you're gonna have to crash classes. So that like I went to my advisor when I was still in computer engineering, and she was talking about how I was like behind the curve in engineering, like in taking classes, and it wasn't because I was failing at my classes, repeating them. Like I was doing okay. I wasn't doing great. I was doing okay, and but I was having a hard time getting classes. And she told me you have to start crashing courses. And I just gave her this look like I don't. What do you mean? Like you're gonna have to bother these teachers, go to their classes with dozens of other students. Depending on the course, it might be like a literal dozen of other students that are trying to fill that course, and the, the teacher will just say, I can't fit anyone else. We have as much equipment as we have students that were registered for this course. Like, I can't help any of you. Or maybe I can help one or two of you. And, or maybe they'd only help people on the wait list. And since you couldn't get on the wait list in time, because so many people tried to register that the wait list blocked out, that they'll only take people on the wait list, and then you're stuck either way. So,
Okay, um, I'll just jump in and throw in one of my experiences with that. For the civil engineers, we had, well, still have multiple bottleneck courses, as those in the program would say. Uh, those ones, we had just classes that would get packed, and then since it's a bottleneck and they're just too difficult to pass in one go sometimes, so you'll have multiple years trying to go after it. So it just compounds the issue even further. Uh,
yeah.
and I'll go ahead and
And
pass it to Tony.
and you'd also mentioned in your previous video about priority registration, which I think they've tried to make a bit better because they basically handed out priority registration like candy before. Um, and they realized that they made like a huge mistake because the relatively few people that were supposed to have priority registration ballooned out of control. But there are still people, like when you register as a freshman, they offer you to take the 4 year pledge. And that's, from what I've heard, it's like a rigorous thing. Like you pledge to do this, they come up with a plan. So you got to take these classes and they give you priority registration. You're supposed to keep like a certain like GPA and be able to pass these courses, or else you fall off priority registration. And then, so when and this can last your entire 4 years. So there are people that will be trying to take it as a third year or second year, but since it's a course you can take as a first year, like, tough luck to everyone else. Uh, and yeah, that really hurts the impaction rate too. Right. So what were we talking about next?
I was you had just finished your
Did you just want me to talk about the my very specific interaction with the student body council stuff?
I looked at your notes, and you can go ahead and talk about all of this. That's why I just wanted to prep the audience first about what specifically you'll be going through. So,
All right, so this is going to be a little bit more into the weeds, I feel. Uh, because you might not like know exactly what's happening when you're at school. You just might notice like, oh hey, this doesn't work, or like this sucks, or I'm not getting as much money for my club, and you might not know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. But um, during my tenure, which I might say like when I started getting more involved was when I was outside of engineering. So like if you're in engineering, like I don't blame you if you can't like join this stuff because it's fairly time intensive. Uh, anyway, so
okay. I guess go ahead and let the audience know what sorts of positions you had before you start each topic, because I know that these are all generally over the many years that you were involved with the school politics.
yeah, so student politics like well the first thing I wanted to talk about was like the politics that happens at the institution level, so that affects the entire school, is really like off balance. So what like we went through a semester conversion last year, and like most people like don't understand why we did it because it just seems to have sucked. There wasn't a plan to do it, and then we switched. There wasn't like a reason to do it, and then we switched. It was we switched, and then we had to find out, like, figure out what to do. So this affected all students. And what I learned was that for years, the student body had voted against switching to semesters. The teachers had voted against switching to semesters. The staff, or faculty and staff together, I don't know which ones teachers are. Uh,
I believe
everyone
they
voted.
count as faculty.
Okay, so the staff voted against switching to semesters. And our previous president said, actually, we're going to do it anyway. And just like executive order did that and then left, like literally left that year. So he didn't have to deal with any of it. And this cost the state billions of dollars. No, did I say billions? Millions, millions of dollars. That would be crazy if it cost billions of dollars. Um, but it cost the state a hefty sum because whoever runs the California like state education thing was basically trying to get everyone onto semesters and offered to pay the schools to switch, so it cost the state money. Uh, Whereas our previous university president apparently now has a cushy job because they did the department head of solid.
Yeah, and on
So
top of that, the student body at large was definitely impacted and were given a very short time frame to really prepare themselves.
yeah, so this had happened right before we got there, right, John?
I believe it actually happened in our freshman year when they decided they were going to do it, when that vote came to a head. And then as we finished our freshman year, they then decided that it was going to start happening going forward. So they began planning. And then after most of the departments had come up with their general plan, not any specific plans, but general plans, they then announced it to the student body at large that wasn't paying attention. And it was in our third year, the beginning of our third year there, that they basically said you have a year to prepare for reals.
Yeah, so it was supposed it was supposed to take effect in our fourth year, but whatever happened, they were not prepared that year, so it happened in our fifth year. Um, and like it just kind of sucked because you had this plan for under a quarter system, and then it wasn't like near till the end, like before the switch, that you got to figure out what your new plan was. And they said no one was going to have to add time to their courses, but that was completely wrong. So many things like fell through the cracks. Like there were people that had to take like A B C class, and A was a prerequisite to B. But then they added like another course. They combined like B and D together, and now you had to take this entirely different course that you never had to take before just to fulfill this requirement of a class that got merged with your class,
Yeah, otherwise you'd have to take the full semester equivalent.
which is worse. Like it's you would waste like 5 more weeks doing that, basically.
Yeah, and to top it off, when the before the conversion even took place, the departments had multiple years to prepare, and many of them, as I had mentioned earlier, just had their general plans ready, so they knew where they wanted it to go, but none of them had talked to each other beforehand. So for the civil engineering department and the engineering department in general, uh, they didn't even talk to each other. So for the civils that needed to take mechanical engineering courses, the mechanical engineering college did not want to come up with specialized classes for them. So they modified, so the civil engineering department, that is, modified uh, those courses and just adopted most of the teachings from them and brought them in and made their own civil engineering versions. And so the bottleneck classes became civil engineering specifically, which would technically make it a little bit easier, but from what I've heard, it's just as difficult as it was before. But that's mainly just because nobody really has any real idea what they're doing since they had to get civil teachers to teach it because no mechanical engineer teachers wanted to sign on to that.
Yeah. So the process was just like kind of a mess. From what I've heard, we were able to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that other schools had made. Uh, but yeah, like a lot of stuff went wrong. Like just a lot of stuff happened necessarily from the conversion that just suck. And the fact that the conversion didn't have to happen at all just, like sucks even more.
Okay, well, I suppose that's enough us talking about the negatives, uh, mainly because that would have only affected us and anybody joining now. Uh, they will be feeling the reverberations from these decisions, but they probably won't have it as hard as we did at the moment. So, well, hopefully
Yeah.
that is. So,
Yeah. So you don't have to. No one else will have to deal with the uh, semester conversion. Everyone will have to deal with a school president or a university president that is able to take unilateral actions, basically. And I think that's more of the point I wanted to make. Is basically watch out for what the president's doing.
Yeah, on top of just showing how big of an effect it really had on the student body at large, just for people to now have that as precedent. Okay, I suppose let's move on to the next topic at hand.
Okay, so this is has more to do with like how students interact with each other's basically. This is student government. Our student government is called ASI, which stands for Associated Students Incorporated. Uh, they are a council of students made up from a legislative and executive branch. So there are senators that one senator per college. So like engineering gets a senator, science gets a senator, liberal arts and social sciences gets a senator, uh, and then there are three at-large senators, which everyone gets to vote for. You have the fraternity and sorority senator, the cultural senator, and the uh, student interest senator. So for the colleges, only people in the college can vote for a senator, but the senators at large, the entire student body is affected by them, so the entire student body gets to vote for them. In the executive branch, you have these president, vice president people who run on a ticket, and then they basically have appointees that they can make for their cabinet. Uh, each senator, along with being associated with a college, is associated with what's called a council. So these councils are supposed to oversee like the student life, like clubs mainly is what they oversee, but they're also supposed to run events. So science has a senator and a council. Engineering has a senator and a council. Student interest council is a council at large and has their own senator. So, and it's with these councils that most students will interact with their student government because they are the intermediary step between the individual clubs and ASI. So let me know if that made sense, John.
It did in general, but like we mentioned before, it's going to be pretty nitty gritty from here on out. So for those that didn't catch it, it really was pretty straightforward if you look at it in like a chart form. But
Yeah.
uh,
So
I would
if
recommend re-listening to his explanation and possibly coming up with Cal Poly's charts. I believe they have online. I'm not sure.
I think I could say it in like a federated way. So you have like the legislative and executive branch at the top, and then under them you have uh, councils, and councils under them is like the entire student body. And some councils are associated with colleges, and some are associated with special interest groups like culture or nothing in particular, as SIC is.
Okay,
So,
that did make more sense. So
okay,
I guess let's go ahead and
that's
move forward.
okay. So, there's kind of a problem with the politics, the student politics of ASI, in that there's no balance of power. Um, how do I explain this? So the senators are supposed to be representatives of students, right, John?
Correct.
And they have a specific college and council that they're supposed to be able to report to, and uh, but they're not required to. So what some people will do is like just randomly start showing up to council meetings and be like, actually, I'm running for your senator. And people are like, I don't know who you are, but you're the only one running. So congratulations, you're the senator. And then they never show back up because they got what they wanted. They're the senator now.
Yeah, and now
And
they've proven that they are not really in the loop.
correct. So, and I know there's someone that's going to be asking, well, why can't they just impeach him? Literally impossible. The only way to get a senator out of power is for the Senate to vote them out. So what this means is if you're the senator and you piss off the students you're supposed to represent, like if you vote against their interest, nothing that can be done. If you are like perfectly representing your like your college or your interest group, but the other senators don't like it, you're out, you're gone. Like it makes zero sense.
Yeah, so now you know who their real audience is versus their interests.
And before that used to have to be done on a supermajority vote, like 60 to 40, I think it was. Um, if it wasn't 2 to 3, uh, and they got rid of it. So all votes in ASI are now just simple majority. So it's even more of like a populist kind of thing where you don't really represent your own college, you represent more of the student body. But the entire point is you're supposed to represent your college and the body at large. Anyway, uh, so and when I wasn't like talking about a hypothetical where some senators would just stop showing up to council meetings. This is like a chronic problem. I have heard from multiple council presidents saying like our senator never shows up, they never do their job, they don't do this, they don't do that, we don't even know what they're doing. And simultaneously, they're not lazy in one context, they're lazy in the Senate too. They don't show up to their Senate meetings, they don't show up to these um, I don't know what to call them, like these think tanks basically that uh, senators are supposed to go to, which is an opportunity for students to like get involved and get a diverse perspective. They don't show up a lot to those either. So these, but they're able to get away with it because the other senators like them.
Yeah, so
And I'm not a
it's the they don't have to attend the committees that they've been assigned to, in a sense.
committees yet. So yeah, and I wish I was like kidding or that like people would say I had a grudge because this is what I've heard around from the Senate, like people complaining about other senators not showing up to these committees. Uh,
And this is not, and we haven't even touched on the fact that some people within these systems that we've been talking about are paid positions.
yeah, so I think I think all the senator and um, executive positions get a scholarship, um, but it's really small. Uh, there, I don't think it even covers like a full semester of like costs.
Yeah, but
So,
without having to perform work, it's just bad incentive, in a sense. That's why I wanted to bring
oh
it
yeah,
up.
yeah, right. So there are some people in there that like get paid less but have to do more work and are on the hook for more responsibilities. Like I don't think the senators themselves have to risk like their own like finances, but I've heard of some executive positions where, since they're handling budgets, they're personally liable for funds, which means I don't know why you would have a student like personally liable for money that has to like plan like interstate flights, but they do. So if they mess up, they have to pay out. Um, anyway, so there are other lack of balancing powers to the Senate. So the only way to counteract the Senate basically is to uh, get all the councils together. And so, like I said earlier, every college and interest group has a council. And so there's one council for every senator. So if the senators aren't like doing something responsible, you're supposed to be able to get all the councilors together, or all the councils, and be able to vote on a plan of action that the Senate has to pass like a supermajority just to deny. But the Senate has been chronically, like meticulously poking away at the power of the intercouncil, like just really trying to take away like any of the power that could oppose them. So like over the years, like councils have become like more and more neutered.
Where they become just
Um,
a voice that it has to be listened to rather than, uh, uh, I suppose you'd have to deal with. It's just something on the interim.
yeah, so they're trying they're trying to take away council's ability to like make the Senate do something, basically. Um, and the intercouncil meetings used to be overseen by someone from the executive branch. Last year, the Senate voted to change the bylaws so that one of the senators would be overseeing the intercouncil. And I think you could see that as a conflict of interest, because these councils are supposed to be directly balancing the Senate's power, and you're putting a fox in the henhouse that's able to like guide the meeting and the discussion, and potentially has the power to like divert the council off of whatever planet it had. And one of these senators, I might add, is representing one of the councils. So there is an extra step of conflict of interest that can arise. So I don't know how that's been playing out because I graduated last year. But the Senate's just really easily able to change the bylaws because the Senate themselves just, rewrite it. And then they put it up for a popular vote, and if it gets majority approval over disapproval, it passes. And it's really just as simple as that. There's no other body has like a chance to edit these bylaws. It's the Senate says this is how things are going to be, and you can either approve or disapprove, but there's no changing it.
Okay.
And
Well, oh, go on.
and I was just going to say, like, and Cal Poly student body isn't like very politically active in any sense, like, and especially not when it comes to school. So they kind of just, like put a check mark, like, yeah, sure, whatever. Not
Okay.
to mention that these bylaws can be kind of dense, so that just makes it hard to get through.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next page of notes that I see that you have. Let's go ahead and move on to the kinds of people that uh, are part of these obvious conflict of interest positions and what seems to be round and round in this whole system.
Right. So this is definitely, I have personal feelings about this because like I'm talking about like the kind of people that are involved, and they are definitely like type A fakers. Like they have like the type A personality of like they want to go out and meet everyone and like take charge and like make the community better, but they are faking it, and they're not like genuinely engaged with you. They want your vote. They are like basically school versions of professional politicians. Um, they're constantly backstabbing each other, but you have to invite them to parties, right? Like in the Senate, there'd be someone be like, "Yeah, I'm trying to like get him like super hard to like get him to quit the Senate or to do this or to do that," or I'm like telling his or her girlfriend or boyfriend to do this or that to like just mess with what they're doing. Oh, but you have to invite them to a party because everyone likes them. And if you don't invite this person that everyone likes to this party that all the Senate's going to, people are going to hate you.
Which goes back to the whole thing of only the Senate can get rid of senators thing.
Right. And there was a few years ago an incident where it was of, I am not kidding, real political concern to the student body who the president was and was not sleeping with. What you could or could not convince the president to do and how the politics worked was 100% involved with being able to convince someone else on not even the school body, like on an auxiliary program, like convince them to do this.
Okay.
And
In that case, we should probably move on from that line of thought and move on to the personalities of the senators and presidents that I see.
okay, yeah. So how I described it is like basically petty dictators. They 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 have a small amount of power, but it can be kind of impactful to your student life. So there are some people that will like go kind of crazy and like abuse it. Like I have seen a few people that just suddenly change. Like, how dare you question me on this decision? I know what's going on because I am a senator. Thank you very much. And it becomes kind of hard to like talk to the people when they start doing that. And I don't know if it's like the other senators that like evoke this kind of grandiosity between each other, or if it's just particular people that do this. But yeah, it happens. Like they start forming vendettas against the student body, and they don't want you to question them, and they think they know what's right.
Basically, they know what's right and don't talk back.
Right. You're just there to elect me. You're not there to hold me accountable.
And I get a minor scholarship, and ran unopposed.
So many of these people run unopposed. If you want to be in the Senate, just fucking do it. There's like a 50% chance that you'll get it. Like I am not kidding. Some of these offices weren't just running unopposed. There was no one running. There was no one in the race. So try it out. Just do it.
Okay. And I see you have a note here for inefficiency in ASI.
Yeah. So since they're kind of a high level organization, they 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 kind of have a hard time like making concrete plans. I think so. There was an organization that was under them called Beat, which they were supposed to put on events, but Beat had like almost no oversight, and it was run really poorly. So so they would waste tons of money. The events would be very poor, and people started wondering like, why do we even have them around? So there was one incident where Beat was spending, I think it was like $500 on 500 stickers. So that means they were spending $1 per sticker, and no one could figure out why they needed to spend like that much money on stickers, what the stickers were, because there's also an accounting problem in Beat, or there was. Beat got really like subordinated to a different organization, so that's more indicative of how inefficient ASI used to be. They're still really inefficient, but they got rid of that broken horse. I don't know. What do you get rid of, John?
Old friends,
They got rid of Beat like an old friend.
like a deadbeat.
Yep. But in 2015, there was someone that ran for ASI president who promised that he would add a food pantry to school. Do you remember this, John?
I remember hearing of it. Uh, I wasn't really too involved back then, to be honest.
Okay. He was going around to like all the clubs, trying to get them to vote for him. Um, he didn't win that year. I think he won. Yeah, no, he didn't win 2014, 2015. He won 2016, 2017. Anyway, doesn't matter. Uh, he had been promising to add a food pantry for a long time, and it didn't materialize in the 2 years he was there. It didn't materialize the next year. It didn't materialize last year either. Last year, they finally made plans to do it. So 4 years after promising to put a food pantry in, they made plans to make a food pantry. Like hallelujah, it's finally happening.
Too bad we aren't going to be there to enjoy it, though we probably help pay through our tuition somehow, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, they take a fee. So there's an ASI fee that goes into or comes out of your tuition. Um, gosh, so there was like a lot of debate from what I heard on like how to organize the food pantry. And last year when I would walk around, there'd be like food collection bins, like donate to the food pantry. So ASI sure as hell wasn't going to spend their own money supporting hungry students. They were relying on you to do it out of the kindness of your heart, but not theirs.
So, donations from the student body, essentially.
Yep. So, and this was kind of in parallel with what was happening with the student union building. So, 2 years ago, I was involved with one of the committees that was supposed to like overlook the running of the student union building. Um, and someone came up to us one week and told us this building is in dire need of repairs. He showed us a schedule of how buildings like need to be maintained over a number of years, and that there's a point when you have to replace them, basically replace or do like super intensive renovation. And he showed us like at this point you have to make plans for renovation because those plans to renovate take 5 years. When he showed us this, we should have been making those plans 5 years ago. So we were 5 years behind when we needed to have been doing this point. And it takes 5 years to make that plan, at which point it it needs to have been done. Like that building, af- in 10 years, it's going to be like run down, basically. And then it's going to take 5 years to renovate. And so you're civil, right? So you understand this a lot better than I do.
Yeah. Uh, and I see you have a note here that the main reason they didn't wish to take part in these renovations so soon was because uh, basically they were afraid to raise student fees even more via that
Yeah,
ASI student fee that we just mentioned a few minutes ago.
yeah. So they had to opt when this was brought up, not just 5 years ago, but every year since 5 years ago, or more like 7 years ago at this point. They had the opportunity to go ahead with a plan, but they thought it'd be unpopular to raise fees. So, like any politician, they promised they're not gonna raise taxes, and then nothing really happens because then there's this like big project that like had to get done and couldn't, and but had to get done.
Okay. Well, I believe that is the end of your notes on the student government through ASI and the council system. And you do have another one on foundation, I believe, correct?
Yeah. So, foundation is a private organization that operates on the premises of Cal Poly Pomona. So they handle almost all the food handling, and they handle some of the housing, right? Not all of it.
Correct. I believe they don't handle the like one or two of the freshman dorms, but I know they're going to have their fingers uh, in that pie of the new buildings that just got built.
Mm-hmm. Uh, so they're associated with the school, but they're kind of separate from it. This is kind of a standard operating procedure at other colleges. I think it's like some legal thing.
Yeah, you can't just have it through the school alone because, as you've seen, there's already been conflict of interest within the school. And since it is a state school that receives federal funding as well as state funding, they're required by law to include these sorts of features. But as the notes that I've read over from Tony uh, sort of indicate, uh, there's a lot of issues with using these sorts of systems that sound good when written down, but need a lot more laws written between the lines for what's actually being taken on the ground.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the features of Foundation was that they had a monopoly of food on campus. I am not kidding. They got to decide what food could be sold on campus. So they owned all the restaurants except for one. And there was a school rule that vendors could not come onto campus and sell food. So other schools, they let companies come on, they get to sell food. You get to like have a nice variety like once a week. Not a Cal Poly Pomona. The only external vendors are actually clubs. So for fundraising, clubs that want to fundraise are allowed to sell food on campus, but not actual businesses.
And I am not sure, but I remember somebody had told me that uh, for clubs that wanted to bring food for their own members, did they need to go through a foundation at all when that sort of thing would happen if they were selling to their own clubs, not just providing it for free?
No, that's I think that's more of an ASI thing. So ASI has its own certain rules about food handling. And well, one of course, there's the state requirement where you have to have a food handler's license if you're preparing any food. If you just bring pizza on, it's not a problem. So you can get Costco pizza, give it out, um, but you're not supposed to use like ASI funds for it. It's it's a thing.
Okay, and that's part of that double system you're talking about, where this is the school's version of foundation and their uh, authority.
So I don't know why Foundation's able to make the rules, but I'm pretty sure it's because they're not as separate from Cal Poly Pomona as they try to pretend.
Especially if they're basically part of this whole system that's already obviously uh, interest conflicted just everywhere, as well as owning the housing, the majority of the housing, and obviously all the food, as Tony said. So, uh, although this may be politics, it obviously plays a huge role in how a normal person is going to be interacting with the school on a daily basis, be they on campus or commuting.
Yeah, if you're living on campus, if you're eating on campus, you're going to deal with Foundation. And so I think it's important to like be able to know what it's doing.
Okay, and
Unfortunately,
oh, go on now.
unfortunately, Foundation does like to lie. So in the committee I was in that had to deal with the student union, um, we had a meeting where a representative from Foundation came to us and was showing us like proposed changes to like school or like how business operated. And so they had done a poll of all the students, staff, and faculty of the school and like divided it like based whether or not they lived on or off campus. And so we had this like nice bar graph. And he said, it seems most people want to have more variety in their food. Like overwhelmingly, students that live off campus and teachers and faculty all want more variety in food. And I pointed out, but you're also leaving out the fact that overwhelmingly, students that live on campus want more more hours available to be able to purchase food from the variety of shops at school. And that this is ranked number 2 across the board of everyone at the school. This is the number 2 thing. I said, I think this is where you should be aiming because this is a like not just a big problem, but it's like a large section of. I was living on campus at the time, so like I know the challenges of like not being able to get food at like 8 at night. You think you'd be able to get food, but you'd have to either walk right up the hill or down the hill to one of the 2 places that was open until 10.
And the food provided at either of them have many strings attached, and the variety is not really there.
Yeah, gosh, and then everything closes at 5 on Friday, and nothing's really open on the weekend. There's the Los Olivos is open on the weekends, but it opens for brunch, and then it's closed most of the day. Then it opens it back up for dinner. So if you sleep in and you're a freshman, oh, oh, honey, you're gonna miss breakfast like every day. Um,
And then that's not even talking about the food system they have. But I believe you were talking about Foundation and the representative.
right. So I was just saying like you should offer more hours because this seems to be something very important, and for a large portion of the school, this is like has heavy implications on our lives. And he told me, actually, I think if you look at the hours provided, you'd find them more than substantive. He lied to me. He lied to me. I had been at that point. I had been living on campus for 3 years, and I knew what the food situation was like on campus. And he told me I had to look harder. He lied to me.
Yeah, an outsider would obviously not really know the situation on the ground, which is the reason why they had this poll in the first place. So to say, look beyond the graph and ignore basically what it's saying is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, for like a large portion of the school body, they want like more hours, but it's more important for a certain section of the students to go with the number two option. Like these aren't like go with the number one and like the number five. This is the second option.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and
yeah, I just found it bothering that foundation was more willing to lie than the hours situation.
okay, and I know that's the end of your notes, but keeping on that last uh, topic we were just talking about, since I didn't mention it in my previous video, uh, I guess let's talk about like food packages because I know they have the 19 unit meal plan, a 14
Yeah.
unit meal plan, a 10 unit, and I'm not sure what the last one was to be honest.
Um, I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly what it was. Basically, what it boiled down to was you could get food twice twice a day, except on weekends. You get food twice a day, including on weekends, and you get food 3 times a day on weekdays and twice a day on weekends. Right?
Correct. And I just remembered what the fourth option was. It was just a blanket amount of money put onto the card
Okay.
that you're using for these other options as well, your student ID. And you had
I think.
what were called Bronco Bucks that did not roll over per quarter, and you basically had to use them up. Otherwise, that's money that you spent just wasted.
Oh no no! This is the confusing part. Bronco bucks are a different form of currency. You had meal points.
Yes, yes, I forgot. Sorry.
So our school had like two forms of currency: meal points and uh, Bronco bucks. You can use Bronco bucks to buy food, but you can't use meal points to print anything.
Yes, and the meal points were very selective. If you go to any restaurant other than this Los Olivos that we mentioned, which is on the north side of campus up the hill, or the what was the Denny's but now just called the Den on the south side, they had multiple options that utilized a full meal point. Otherwise, any amount above, I think it was 650 for breakfast, 750 for lunch, and 850 for dinner. Anything that you bought that costs more than that, you can use one of your meal points into it to credit, and then anything above it, you just pay either through Bronco Bucks or in cash or debit or whatever.
Yeah. So like you couldn't get like full meals that way because guess what? That might be an appropriate amount for like other places, but when the prices at school are already jacked up, you're like not getting a full amount of food in a day.
And that's where, in my
So
first video, I mentioned if you're going to live on campus and you're living anywhere but the freshman dorms, to just buy food off campus and just products off campus in general
absolutely.
because it's
Yeah. There's one place you can live called the Suites where you still have to buy a meal plan, and the cheapest meal plan you can get is the one where you just pay $1,000 a quarter and you get $1,000 in the quarter. I don't know why it's done like that. They just basically guarantee you spend $1,000 in food at their locations every year or every quarter. It's
not to
different now, I'm
mention
sure.
rent as well.
Hmm. So
And that's why in my first video I recommend the village. Yeah.
yeah, if you have the option between living at the suites or the village, go to the village. They don't make you pay for a meal plan, and you're gonna have to go off campus to get food anyway. And guess what? There's parking in front of your house at the village. You can't get that in the suites. You have to like, well, it depends. Sometimes it's a short walk. Sometimes it's a really fucking long walk.
And then either way, you're gonna have to walk 20 plus minutes to get to any class if you're in most of the majors, other than I think maybe art or music.
Oh, absolutely. And there's It's not like the village where there's a shuttle that comes outside. You have to walk. It's just a worse deal. And it's more expensive.
And I guess to add on the last, I guess probably insult to injury, they didn't have proper bike racks out there or proper security. So in Tony's case, they actually stole his bike, and although there's a security camera right there, aiming right near it, it wasn't aiming right at it, supposedly, from what I remember.
Yeah, so I just want to point out that when Jonathan says they stole my bike, he doesn't mean the housing squad or whatever. He means like just some random people stole my bike. So yeah, uh, yeah, the security cam points at the door so that they know who's coming and going. But
The
they
bike rack
really,
right next to the door, obviously not.
yeah, they take, they took full, how do I say it? They made great use of the fact that they held no liability for your stolen goods, so they didn't even try to protect it.
Yeah, and I just remembered, since the bike rack used to be right next to it. Laundry facilities. I never mentioned that in the first video. Uh, you do have to pay for your own laundry at the freshman dorms and at the suites. Uh, at the village, you
At the
do
village,
not,
it's free.
and you get a communal one that actually has more laundry machines and dryers than either the other two did. And
Yeah.
since it's
So
more selective and not as large of a community servicing those facilities, uh, people won't just take your laundry out of the washer or dryer and just leave it out if you were even 10 seconds late, or even if you're standing right there. They're shameless like that.
mhm. And I just want to say, I hope it's better with the new dorms, freshman dorms. But when we were there, it was three washers, three dryers for an entire building.
Of around maybe 100 plus, 150 plus, obviously.
It was hell.
There were no
Like I start,
designated days, no nothing.
you had to figure out these days. And let me, for all you Magic players out there, you had to play around the meta. So you can't just do it Friday, Saturday, or Sunday because that's when everyone wants to do it. So maybe you go to Thursday, but now Thursday's full. So you go to Wednesday and Wednesday full, and then one day you're like, I can't do it anymore. It's Sunday. I just have to wash some socks, and no one's there.
That happened on multiple occasions to me as well. And I realized that on Wednesdays, people started coming more to it when they started noticing that I was able to go with no problem. And then I instantly switched, alternating between Tuesday and Thursday, but nobody else was doing it. And I would go late at night since I didn't have classes on Wednesday or Friday for that one quarter that I tried doing that, and it worked out fine. But as he said, you're going to have to work around a lot if you're going to be going to the freshman dorms or suites.
You also lost your laundry card.
Yes, but I'm not going to talk about that on here mainly because it was just due to failure to communicate, as well as a person just being a complete dummy and losing my card for me by jamming it down the machine and costing me $20 plus, and then another $20 I had to then put on another laundry machine card.
That's right. Yeah.
And also, as an update, I literally just got my diploma today in the mail.
Woo-hoo.
The thing says do not fold. It was folded into my mailbox. But
You had a job.
mailman, post office work, we will not talk about on this in this video. Maybe later. In that
Biggs and
case,
Baca, episode 27. Let's talk about the postal office.
thanks
Anyway.
Genghis Khan with your Pony Express. Uh, In that case, is there any last little bit of detail you want to add in, or since you have the opportunity
Yeah,
to say personally?
yeah. So I had parking on here too. I don't know if that was on the notes I sent you.
No.
Uh, so the parking situation's kind of bad at our school. Um, it was bad, and they somehow made it worse. So we had a few years ago. We had the only things that we had at school were like flat top, um, like parking spots, and then two structures. Right, John? Only two structures.
Two structures and a faculty and staff parking lot.
So a few years ago, they took one of those flat top parking lots and they turned it into like a structure. Or they did it a couple places. So there's like two or three new structures. Um, those. So you would think they added new parking. What we came to figure out was that was just to offset the parking we were losing as a result of building a new administrative building.
Because the old administrating building was built upon a fault line and was apparently sinking fast enough that you couldn't get running water above the third or fourth floor, if I remember correctly, by the
Really?
time it was our sophomore year. Yes. And they were starting to operate out of the portables on the south side. That's why you stopped having some history classes in that corner.
Okay, yeah. So on your marketing things, you'll see this like beautiful pointed building. It, it's going away. That's what was built on the fault line. They have to tear it down.
Yep, apparently they're going to use the bricks for something just aesthetic, but at the same time, uh, probably nothing for the next half decade because they really have no clue. They just wanted to empty it out.
Yeah. So and then like a few hundred feet south is where like this really big parking lot used to be. That's where they put the new administrative building. So we got rid of a lot of parking, and I think we got rid of some parking too with the new dorms that they're building.
They added parking for the dorms themselves because they realized that they were about to add in 1,000 plus more students, literally, with those two or three buildings. So uh, they added in parking for at least a couple hundred. Not gonna lie, that's
This
literally just
is
a couple hundred.
so
They're
so these structures were just supposed to offset the amount of parking we were supposed to lose. Apparently, they didn't even do that right, and we still lost parking spaces.
Yes, and the attendance has increased massively due to publishing across the seas. So we have more international students as well, and maybe that's why they didn't think they needed uh, as many parking spots, which could be true. But on paper, it really doesn't even sound good. So why in practice would it sound good?
I don't know. I don't even know why. Can you pause for a second?
Yes, from what I've heard when I was doing my final summer courses, and I had to take water classes, specifically water reclamation and desalination. We took a quote unquote field trip to the water system on campus, and from what the guy was griping about, apparently they did not tell them the people that operate 60 plus percent of Cal Poly's water and, well, pump it and then actually treat 100% of that water. They did not tell them that they were actually building these buildings to include people. They apparently found out on their own when they started noticing that the buildings that were going up were like 3+ stories tall, and they noticed that they were putting in windows. So they were like, okay, this is not just an administration. This looks just like the suites. So that's how they found out they were adding in 1,000 plus more students. So the water system was not prepared for that. So now they're having to increase tuition this year, or they increased it so that they can afford to rapidly fix the water system there. Because for the time being, they're going to have to import more water from off-site.
Yeah, and Cal Poly has like a weird thing with water. Apparently, the water's sulfuric.
Yes, and mainly, it passes all quote unquote primary drinking water standards, but none of the, not hardly any of the secondary ones, like the aesthetics, the color, the taste, or the smell, really. So,
You can,
just putting that out
if
there.
you take a shower, if you take a shower at the suites, prepare to smell like sulfur.
Yes, and it is very, it's a lot of hard water, so a lot of calcium and magnesium build up on a lot of fixtures, and you'll see slime growing around everywhere. There is a water fixture, and that is apparently bacteria that eat calcium and magnesium. So if you use your sink at all, even once, apparently it's enough to get these guys going.
So get a filter.
Which will be needed to be changed multiple times in a single semester.
Yeah, that was it was important to learn that you needed filtered water.
Oh, hold on, Tony.
Right.
Okay, and I believe that is probably the last main topic we should probably talk about. Anything else, we'll just add in uh, posthumously.
Yeah, no, I think that was like those were the main points. I think the only thing else I could say is that these problems aren't like unique to Cal Poly Pomona. Some places have it better, some places have it worse. Uh, you're gonna have to figure out what your school's like.
Which is the whole reason we sort of put this one for Cal Poly together, because we have plenty of knowledge and gripes over the years, so we're willing to talk about it, especially now that we're done. Uh,
One
so,
of my one of the student body's favorite pastimes is griping. Funnily enough,
yep. Uh, so that's mainly the reason we put this out there. So for anybody interested in Cal Poly Pomona, these two videos are really the ins and outs, what it's on the ground level, what it's like from the political level on the scene, as well as just what's generally going on behind the scenes. And I believe that's it. Uh, I guess want to say goodbye, Tony.
goodbye. I hope what I had to say was helpful for at least one person.
Don't worry, that person was yourself all along. AKA
Well,
me, because, uh, yourself is my username, so
a
you got me some views. Thank you.
welcome.
Alrighty, well,
It was fun getting to talk with my good friend again.
yep, especially now that you moved on to greener pastures.
Well, this is an urban environment, so it has less grass. Oh my gosh, Cal Poly has these beautiful trees. They bloom in the summer. But climate change, it's made them not bloom as much anymore.
And yeah, that's why I tried to end it earlier, folks. Alrighty, well, I'm going to end the recording in just a few seconds. But thank you for tuning in. Sorry if this got boring at all. And catch you all later.